Hi, this is Elizabeth at craftsbyhappystamper.com. Thanks for joining me today. I'm participating in a blog hop with Team Stamp It, and you can get all the details and continue on the hop by clicking on the link in the description bar. Today I'm sharing with you 4 cards I made using a 6x6 one sheet wonder. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. So this is the piece of paper I decided to start with for the one sheet wonder, and the crumb cake side is directional because the hearts go in a certain direction, so I had to be careful to cut it very specifically. So first I turned it on its side and cut at 0.75 inches all the way across, and then I cut off a little square so that I have a 0.75 by 0.75 square and a 5 1/4 by 3.75 inch length. That's going to be for one of my cards. Then I cut at um, 3 inches, and I cut it again at 3.25, which gives me 2 pieces, one 3x2 and one 3.25, and that's going to be for another card. The third card, I'm going to cut the remaining piece at the top. I'm going to cut it at 2.25 inches, and then I'm going to cut off a sliver at 0.75 inches. And one of those pieces I'm going to use for one card, and the other piece I'm going to use for the other card. And then this is the 2.25 inch long strip, which I'm going to cut a square that's 2.25, another piece at 1 inch, and that will leave me with a 2-inch piece. So I'm sure this is confusing, and you can get the diagram of how I cut this on my blog, but that's basically how I did it. The first cut is the most important if you're using directional paper. So I had these 4 early espresso card bases already pre-cut and scored that I bought a long time ago. And then in order to make my designs, I needed 8 pieces of Whisper White at 4 by 5 1/4. 4 will be for my front panels and 4 for my inside panels. So you can see I'm just doing the traditional cutting to get those done right now. It's, you know, pretty simplistic at this point. Later I'll show you how I split it all up, but I did pre-design these cards because in order to do the 6x6 I had to know exactly what way to cut it at first. So after I cut all of my pieces by 6x6, I just needed to make mats for all of them, and I used Early Espresso to make a mat for all of them, and they're all just 1/8 inch bigger than the piece that I cut for the designer series paper, except for one. The little 0.75 by 0.75 inch square has a 1/4 inch mat. But you can see this is the general layout of the 4 cards I made, and this was my sketch that I tried to copy for it. But you'll see later that I go a little off the sketch, and the sketch isn't incredibly detailed because I don't have any embellishments on the pieces yet at this point. This was just a general cutting guideline. So the first thing I do is glue everything to their mats except for the sentiment pieces. The white sentiment pieces, I didn't want to glue them down because if I messed up on them, I'd rather just cut another sentiment piece than cut the mats that go behind them. So I don't, you could see me just gluing everything down. I did use liquid glue to attach all of my mats, and that's because if you watch my videos, you know that I'm not very good at getting them perfectly lined up the first time if I use snail or tape adhesive. But with liquid glue, I have a little bit of time to wiggle it around. And actually, although I didn't mess up the layers, I did have to cut a couple new mats because I somehow mixed it up in my mind what size the mat was and didn't cut it correctly the first time. But the correct sizes are on my blog, so you should definitely check that out. I have the general sketch that outline that I used with all the cut marks and the mat sizes listed on the sketch on my blog. So that should make it easiest for you to refer to. So after I had all of my sentiments, all of my mats, I decided to go ahead and stamp the sentiments. Now, a lot of you complain about your photopolymer stamp staining, and actually, if you have a high quality photopolymer stamp, it's going to stain. But one of the ways you can minimize the stain is when you first use it to stamp it in Versamark, like you just saw me. I just stamped it in Versamark on a piece of scratch paper, and then now I'm cleaning it. So I cleaned all the Versamark off. Now I'm going to use rose red ink, which would normally stain a photopolymer stamp. pretty thoroughly actually. Two of my sentiments are going to be exactly the same, so I stamped them twice, and then I cleaned off the stamp, and you could see it in the corner there. It's almost completely clear now. And I did the same thing for all of my stamps, and they all look pretty much clear. They will eventually stain over time the more red I use, but it's not as drastic as it would be if I didn't first stamp them in Versamark and stamp it off. It kind of like seasons the stamp, I guess, builds up a little bit of barrier. I'm not exactly sure why that works, but it does. So for my final sentiment, you could see I did a repeated XOXO on one of them. And then for this final sentiment, I did a Be Mine, and I wanted that solid heart. So I just inked up just the heart on that sentiment and stamped it below the Be Mine. And now that I have all of my sentiments stamped, which I did do on a foam mat, I am gluing them to their sentiment pieces. So some of the sentiments I put a piece of Sahara sand between the early espresso, and some I didn't. It just depended on my feeling of it. But it's all in the sketch. Now you can see I'm using the heart mask, and I'm using a sponge, and I'm just lightly sponging this white piece that's going to be the front panel with, this is Blushing Bride, which is one of the corresponding colors in the designer series paper. I like how it's soft and subtle. I don't want it to distract too much from the rest of the card, but I wanted to give it something. Now I just have to clean off the stencil with a paper towel, and I'm going to do another one in crumb cake. And I thought I was going to do a third color, very light smoky slate, but I didn't like the way it looked, so I ended up doing two panels uh, that I used crumb cake on, and two panels that I used Blushing Bride on. So just like you, right now I'm trying to figure out where did I put my crumb cake pad. I finally found it. But now I'm doing the crumb cake, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm just brushing from the bottom up to the right so it gets softer as you go up. So now I'm going to make my first card, and I went ahead and glued down my front panel, and I'm gluing down the other panels based on my sketch. So since I already have a sketch, this part moves relatively quickly. Obviously I did speed up the video for your purposes, because I actually didn't do this all in one sitting because I had errands to run and whatnot. But I'm just gluing these based on my sketch, and I'm kind of guessing where I want it to end up based on my sketch. Nothing needs to be incredibly exact, just in general where you feel like it looks good. I mean, if you've taken any color theory classes, then you know that your cards should try to be like in thirds. Line things up with the first third or the second third or the third third or whatever. But I decided to use the Botanical Gardens framelits as my accent. And since I did my sentiment in rose red as an accent color, I decided that for most of the flowers and embellishments I would use rose red also. But I did cut some Blushing Bride just to see if I liked how it looked. Now you can see me moving these candy dots around. I cut out three together, and then I can just move it around on the paper and see if I like the way it looks or not. I have three cut out in Early Espresso, Blushing Bride, and Rose Red, and I move them on and off the cards as I decide how I want to do the embellishments. But I use glue dots to attach the Blushing Bride sequence, and I'm using my favorite Wink of Stella clear brush glitter pen to all over the flower. And when you first put on the clear Wink of Stella, it makes the paper look wet, makes it look darker. But when it dries, it doesn't do that. You just see this really pretty glimmer shine. And of course, I added a pearl in the center of the flower in order to finish it off. So this is one of the crumb cake backgrounds that I used. And I didn't really have any rhyme or reason as to which one I picked, except if there was a lot of Sahara Sand DSP showing, then I usually picked the Blushing Bride background, but it really doesn't matter, I don't think. It's just gives a little bit of interest. So you could see I am not adding dimensionals to any of these things. I'm one of those people that feel like if you are going to theoretically mail these, you want only a couple layers. And once you add all the thicknesses of these layers together with the embellished flowers, with the pearls, it's pretty thick already. So originally I had started with that big flower, but I thought it just overpowered this card with that little tiny square there. So I went and cut another flower from Rose Red out of the tiny flower in the Botanical Gardens set that you could see here. And you could see the rose red candy dots on the side there that I kept going on and off the paper to see if I liked it there. So I decided I liked the rose red, and I added them, and now I'm adding the clear Wink of Stella to the flower and the pearl in the center, and I just pulled it up. So the third card has a panel in the relative center of the card, which is just a square with the hearts. And then I have some banners, but I didn't cut the ends because I'm using the entire sheet of 6x6 that are going on the left and right, and the sentiment in the lower right hand third. Love is it's in the air. I love that sentiment. I think it's sweet. And then I went back and forth between the blushing bride and the rose red there, but I decided that I preferred the rose red flower. And you could see me moving the candy dots on and off as I decide what I like and what I don't like. And I decided to add some sequins. Um, there is, a theory that embellishments are more pleasing to the eye if they happen in threes, which is why you see me add three, or at the very least, odd numbers, not necessarily three, but you'll see me add. I almost always add 3 sequins or 5 sequins and 3 candy dots or 5 candy dots, but in this case, I only ever went up to 3 candy dots. And you see, I have one flower, but I would never add 2 flowers because it would just look off balanced. I'm not really sure why that is, but I'm sure that somebody who's an artist could explain it to you better, but that's the general theory about it. If you're trying to help yourself make more balanced looking cards, then that's the kind of theory that I try to go by myself. And now for the final card. I have a 2¼ by 2 inch sentiment, and I'm kind of putting it towards the left because I'm going to do a little trick here that makes it appear like that square is bigger, because I put the long blushing bride panel right up and against the uh, crumb cake panel, so it makes it appear like it goes underneath that and is perfectly centered. But in actuality, the piece is actually smaller. You just can't tell. And this one I did a similar setup as the previous one, but I just changed it up a little bit. But I really like the way these came out. I think that the early espresso matting adds a lot of contrast to the cards that I really think makes it pop better. I am absolutely in love with this Wink of Stella clear glitter brush pen. So for this last one here, I zoomed in so that you can see how it makes the paper look wet. And I use mine so much that I had to shake it a little and squeeze a little harder to get more liquid out because I'm already almost out of this one. But you can see how it glimmers there. And then I added a pearl to make it perfect to me. So the outside of the cards are all done, but I needed to do the inside of the cards. I don't know about you, but I like the inside of the card to be decorated as well. And sometimes I don't do this right away, but I really prefer to do it right away because then when I need the card, it's ready. So I decided that I was going to do an even lighter brushing of Blushing Bride hearts stenciled onto the inside, but instead of covering the whole piece, I just did the bottom and the left-hand corner. So you can see how they ghost here. I'm just showing you how I added it. I did use snail to add the inside piece, and that's it. I did the same thing for all 4 pieces, all 4, but I'm not going to show you me putting them in to all 4, but you could see how there's a ghosting of it, and if you needed to write over that space, you could. So this is what the final 4 cards look like. I hope you like it. It uses an entire piece of um, designer series paper that's 6x6, and all the directions for this are on my blog. If you go to my blog that's linked in the description, you'll also see that there's a great giveaway going on with this blog hop, and that you should comment with the hashtag in order to enter into the giveaway. And all of the cutting guidelines and directions for these cards are on my blog post as well, and you can easily download those. Thank you for joining me. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Thanks.